Hello everyone, welcome to Sinspiration. Today is episode 1 of the I'm Sinspired series. Today I have with me Vincent.
Hey, I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Vincent. Tell us about your role and how you got into it.
Yeah, so right now I'm a software engineering manager at one of the big tech companies. And how I got into it, first off, started off as a software engineer. I was an intern initially, and then I got a job out of college as a software engineer. And then I switched job to my current company, also as a software engineer. And then from there on, I think after 1 year, I became a software engineering manager.
Got it. So you've always pursued this software engineering path right from the very beginning.
Yeah. And through college, I was already studying computer science. And then after college, or I guess during college, I wanted to get internships. And one of my friends at the time told me, it's important to get internships. And I didn't know what it was. So I was just, playing games at the time still. But then afterwards, I got an internship as a QA engineer to start at first. So I was doing like manual testing and automation. But then the second year, I got an internship as a software engineer. And that's kind of how my career started.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So what inspired you to pursue this career path?
Yeah, so at the time, I was still a software engineer, but I was already getting really into processes. I wanted to ensure whenever we launch a product, the quality is there, we have the right process, and it's smooth sailing through the entire development lifecycle. So because I was already really involved, I think my manager at the time thought that this was good quality to go toward kind of a software development manager role. And I think it really inspired me because I would think just overall, the mindset of a manager and a developer was very different. Where developer, you're focusing on delivering, whereas manager, you're focusing more on making sure as a collective, you're working on projects that you can deliver in a timely manner at the right quality.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you've been telling me, it seems like you definitely had a long journey to get to where you are today. Yeah. So what were some of those challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges, one was definitely just kind of age. So, as a manager, people kind of assume that you've already had a lot of experience, either in the tech field or just in life. But, at a young age, it's actually very difficult to have those experience because it depends on tenure. So for me, I think a lot of time it was just making sure I build trust with my employees, trust in, I care a lot about their career development, even if they're at even if they're further along in their development process than I am. Mm-hmm. So caring about that, caring about their happiness at work, caring about what kind of projects they're working on, whether it fits into what they want to do and what they find passion in.
Right.
So I think the challenge was definitely trying to convince my directs at the time that, even though I may not have as much experience, I am capable of helping them.
Right. So it's like looking after the people that work within your team and also ensuring they're able to pursue the career path that they're passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think for me, very early on when I joined the company, I already voiced to my manager at the time that this is a path that I want to go towards. And I think I already had the self-awareness that this is something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So actively voicing that to people gave me this opportunity when an opening came around.
Great.
So then, I was kind of one of the few who people were considering. And very luckily, I was selected for the job.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tell us about the qualifications one would need to get to your position. So this can be school, education, projects, or work experience.
Yeah. So I think, to be honest, you start off as just a software engineer, right? And usually that case, it's a computer science major or any kind of engineering major that you may have from there. And then afterwards, you get into the industry, you start off as one of the software engineering field, either be a QA, a DevOps, just general cloud, mobile, web, or even like machine learning and data science. So something along those realms. And then as you continue your career, I see it as like a funnel. So at first you're a generalist, you're working on a lot of things. And during that time, maybe you're getting deeper into an area that you start noticing you enjoy. So you take like courses, you attend conferences. That's kind of how I got started. I wanted to get deeper into cloud and data. So I went to things like AWS conference. I went to a Kafka conference, and I also met a few folks. Went to one for Databricks with Spark. And I think it further just let me know that this is the path I wanted to be on. So in terms of qualification, I don't think there's a specific thing you have to do. It's very much an exploration phase where you try to do as many things as you can within this specific field, see what hits, and then you go towards that one direction that you actually enjoyed.
Right. Is there like a timeline where you have to specialize?
That's actually a really good question. I don't think there's a timeline. The timeline would be how long it takes for you to explore all the options that you would like. So for me, I've done mobile engineering, I've done web, I've done QA. And for me, I know I didn't really enjoy the QA part or the mobile part. I kind of enjoy web, but then once I got to cloud and data, that was what I really, really enjoyed. And I knew I was good at that. I was thinking about scalability of things. I was thinking about how to process a large amount of data over a small period of time. And those were the problems I was really interested in. So I kept on exploring that area. And I would say I got to that state maybe 3 years after college.
Okay, great. So now let's shift gears. Let's talk about the interview process. So what is that process like, and how would someone prepare for these interviews?
Yeah, so I think for the interviewing process, I'll split into two parts. There's the software engineering portion. For that one, it's very much lead code based. So we break it down into two parts. One is technical, so lead code, data structure algorithm, system design. And then the other part is more kind of behavioral. So we try to ask questions to gauge what would you do in certain situations and try to see if you ever done that before. And if you haven't done it, what would you do philosophically, right? So one example would be, tell me about a time where you had to deliver a project in a tight deadline. What did you do? So things that we're looking for in that place would be, did you de-scope the project? Did you raise awareness saying, hey, this project is at risk? There's a chance that we might not deliver. How did you handle that? How did you make sure something came out of it and wasn't just like, let's just abandon ship, right? Did you sacrifice quality? Did you sacrifice certain product features? What did you do? So that's kind of what we want to gauge in terms of behavioral.
Okay.
Yeah. And then for the software engineering manager portion, I think a lot of pieces involve how you treat people. So do you care about their career? Do you care about how do you manage conflict? So tell me about a time where you disagree with someone. How did that conversation go? And tell me about a time you promoted someone. Tell me about a time where you had to let someone go. So these are very tough conversations that are expected as a manager, and we want to see how you handle them once you get the job. So I think for the manager role, it's mostly going to be around behavioral. There is still a portion around system design, because we want you to be able to think about the entire system. Because once you get into the role, there's going to be problems where maybe this specific thing needs to change, but we need you to think about how that change will impact everything else at the company. So those are something that we also test during the interviewing process.
Right, so having that big picture
Exactly.
as you're making decisions. But it also seems like as a manager, it's not just lead code questions. It's really huge emphasis on behavioral, and also leadership qualities.
Yep, exactly. I think for manager, we actually don't even test in lead code.
Really?
For management interviews, it's mostly going to be around system design. So there are going to be technical portions of the interview where we're asking you, how would you design like APIs? How would you write up your schema for your database? Which database type would you use, like SQL, NoSQL, stuff like that? But we don't actually ask you to write a large amount of code. We just want you to be able to think through how you will structure everything together.
Yeah, that's very insightful.
Yeah.
So all the software engineers watching, hope you took notes on that one. Next, let's talk about compensation. So what are the expected salary ranges for your position or a related role?
I would say let's start with software engineers. So software engineers is a very wide range because you have tech companies that are in the big tech that pays very, very high. And then there's also more things like software engineer at a government job that pay a bit lower. So I think the range would probably be somewhere $70K for someone who is just starting out in the Bay Area. So $70K to maybe somewhere of like $200K at the very high.
That's a big range.
It's a huge range. And I think it also, it depends on the overall total compensation. So for tech roles, usually there's three parts. There is the salary, there's the stock, and there's also bonus. So I think if you're working as a software engineer in the government, there's probably no stock. And it's only going to be salary and maybe some bonus. If you're working at a big tech company, there's most likely going to be stock. So you have all three components. And I think for a new grad within this range is pretty reasonable depending on the specific company that you're interviewing for. And then once you go from there to the next level for like mid-level engineer, I think that range changes to 100K to now probably like 300K. So still a very wide range. And again, it's the same thing depending on which company that you're working for. And then when you go to a senior, it's probably going to be 150K at the low range, all the way to something like 600K.
Wow,
at
that's
the high
a
range.
big jump.
It's a huge range because I think for big tech companies, it's kind of exponential. You start off kind of low and then you pick up extremely high later on. And a lot of that is attributed to stock. So government companies, they're not going to give you any stock. So it's very much linear growth. Whereas for big tech companies, they give you stock and they give you more and more stock the higher you go. So I think the career ladder usually goes from junior, mid-level, senior, principal, maybe something like senior principal or staff. And then there's also fellows, which for Google, I know they have fellows. And yeah, I think the growth is very exponential. When you go to fellow, you could even make like $2 million a year.
Wow.
In your total compensation.
So like in this total compensation, is a majority of it actually in stock?
Yeah. So I would say for big tech companies, they pay mostly in stock. When you're just starting out, it's mostly salary. I would say maybe like 60 to 70% salary and the remaining is stock. But as you go higher and higher, that percentage completely changes where your salary is maybe like 30% or less now of your total compensation. The rest is stock. If you think about the CEOs of the world, their tech or the tech world, most of the time it's going to be like 0.1% salary and 99% going to be RSUs.
I see.
Yeah.
So that's for software developer or engineer. How about for software engineering managers?
I would say for software engineering manager, it's not too different from the scale that I just gave you. I would say it's maybe up to 25% more, depending on what the software engineering manager is doing in that specific company. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of companies, they actually have this thing called tech lead manager, where you're doing a lot of the software engineering job, but you just have the addition of managing duties.
Got it.
Right. So maybe like 70% of your job is going to be still coding, but 30% of the job is just managing a team. So for them, the discrepancy between an engineer and a manager is not going to be too different. But if you think about a different company where maybe the manager's job is just think strategically, and they're actually more in the business than doing the day-to-day of coding, maybe they're like 90% doing management and 10% doing like designs of things, I think the discrepancy gets a bit bigger. Because for them, their job is to be responsible for the financials of that business. So if the company does well financially, it's because of their contribution, and thus they get more pay.
Great.
So I think for them, the discrepancy is different between software engineer and manager.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing the insights on compensation.
Yeah.
So now let's shift gears. Let's talk about how much you like and maybe how it can improve. So let's start off with for this job, what can be better about it?
I'll talk about my specific role. Mm-hmm. So or my specific role at my specific company. So I work at a bigger tech company, and I think the biggest issue is transparency. So whenever there's a new big announcement that affects the entire workforce, a lot of time that decision the decision is communicated, but the rationale behind the decision is not. So one example would be return to office. Right now in the tech world, after COVID, a lot of companies are choosing to return to office either like 2 to 3 times a week, if not the entire week. So a lot of companies are adopting that method, but there's no real reason. And I think a lot of the employees are not that happy about that, right? And I think if these companies, the leaders who make the decision, can provide an example of why this is better for the workforce, I think it makes it easier for people to understand and adopt this new life. But because there is no transparency, it does feel like, oh, my overlords are telling me to go back, or they're just telling me to do something, so I'm just going to do it. So I think when you have more transparency, it helps people understand why something is important. And I think as a leader, it is your job to try to convince people whenever you make a decision. Whether they do take the convincing or not, having some sort of explanation is very important for them. And I think whenever you don't have transparency, people start thinking about the worst, right? They start thinking about, maybe is this, maybe is that. They start creating conspiracies of, we gotta do this because of all these reasons. So you don't want that in your workforce because it creates dissent. So it's better to provide some form of explanation on your decision.
Great. Awesome. And then the next thing is, one of my most favorite questions actually, whenever I ask people, which is, what do you like most about your current job?
I think what I like most is definitely the people, and then just the breadth of areas that I can kind of make impact in. So for my role, I work a lot with kind of the purchase, like the commerce side of things, and a lot as well as data. And I really enjoy just how many groups of people I get to talk to. So I talk to marketing, design, product, QA, also legal and security, a bunch of people. And I get to learn about what they care about, because what they really care about is very different than what I care about. And learning through that process gives me a broader view of what it's like to run a business and all the different components that you have to care for, right? Because starting out as a software engineer, all you really care about is code and deliver. But as you get broader, it's completely different. That's just one piece of the puzzle. There's so many other things that needs to be done in order to launch your product. And being exposed to that is something that you wouldn't be able to get elsewhere, unless obviously if you start a company. So that's something what I really love about my job, is just being able to see how, in a way, like how the sausage is made.
Right.
And definitely the people as well. The people I work with, they have a lot of passion in their work. They genuinely care about what they do, the quality that they do something in, and having strong work ethic. So when you surround yourself with those kind of people, it just makes your work life so much happier.
Right, so something we should all pay attention to is not just what we do in our current job. We should also, kind of explore what other parts of the company and what other teams are working on as well. And that would make our work life more enriching and interesting.
Yep, exactly. And it also helps you understand how the world works, right? Like, so for example, when you hear about a news, maybe like Netflix changes their plan from ad-free to now you have to pay with ads.
That's right.
So when you know how an entire business works, you kind of understand why they're going towards that direction. Whereas if you're just thinking about the software engineering perspective, you might not understand why those decisions are made.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you have for someone who's currently pursuing a role that is similar to yours?
My advice would be, try to pursue something that you are passionate in. And if you don't know what you're passionate in, try different things. And the thing is, everybody are under different circumstances. Some people might not have the opportunity to try a broad number of things, whether you need to have a job right now and make money, or for another reason. And I would say don't limit yourself to just a certain age range. You don't have to try everything during the 20s. You have your whole life ahead of you, right? Albeit, the later in life that you try different things, the harder it is to transition because your life is more grounded. I would say, try different things as early as possible as you can and find what you're actually interested in. Because a lot of times, if you don't try, you wouldn't know. And I think for me, I tried various roles within the software engineering field. I was very lucky that I knew I wanted to pursue software engineering because it's something that I was really interested in and something that I was pretty good at. And within that field, there's so many different choices still, right? Like I said before, there's mobile, web, QA, data science, stuff like that. And you still have to specialize more and more. So you start off as a generalist, you pick a specific area, you become an expert in that area, and then from there on, you become an expert in that area in a specific field. And then later on, in a field, in an industry, and you become an expert in that industry. So it just continues to narrow down further and further as you grow in your career. But that shouldn't limit someone to switch it out if they found that they're passionate in something else. And everything that you've learned before isn't just wasted because, your behavior, your work ethic, things that you learn throughout the entire process is still transferable skills to something that you're going to do later on in life. So I would say focus a lot on building the right skill sets, but also building the right attitude towards your passion.
That's great advice. I will take note of that as well. So Vincent, let's say you have a second chance in your life.
Yeah.
Would you pursue the same career path?
Yeah, I would say so. I think I would do the exact same thing, but in hindsight, obviously when you're looking back, there's so many other things that you could have not done or done sooner. So I think that's the only thing that I would do, where instead of exploring different routes, if I already know what I want to do, then it's just like a straight path to where I am today. But I don't think I would change what I'm currently doing. I think this is where I need to be and what I want to be.
Great. So thank you, Vincent. This is the end of the first episode of the I'm Sinspired series. Really glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing so much insight about what it takes to be a software engineer and also software engineering manager.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you really like this, don't forget to subscribe to Sinspiration to stay up to date with new videos in our I'm Sinspired series, as well as new content on how to grow a mindset. You've been Sinspired today. Hello everyone, welcome to our first episode of the I'm Sinspired series. Today I have with me Vincent. So say hello, Vincent.
Hey.
Cut!
Yeah, I think from there on, pause. Cut.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say to our audience?
No, I think I said it all.